The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys.
Here.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Aldred.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Sanye. We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, June 22nd, 2023.
So move.
Second.
Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Aldred.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. We have 6 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we have approved the minutes of Thursday, June 22nd. At this point, we are going to take up Board Bill number 56. Since I am the sponsor of this board bill, I'm going to hand over the chair to Vice Chair Aldridge.
You ready, Alderman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So Board Bill number 56 is, I think maybe Alderman Oldenburg and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard will recall, it got filed last session because the Missouri Supreme Court has enacted a rule where we must assess this $7 surcharge. So this isn't really something that we have a lot of discretion on. Every municipality throughout the state, other than us and Kansas City, has already instituted this. We run the risk of the Supreme Court actually sanctioning our municipal courts if we don't comply with this. So I don't think there's a lot of discretion here. I take no joy in the fact that this is a $7 surcharge on all the municipal cases here, but I will note that those charges can be waived by the judge if there's a claim of indigence, and the courts, in my professional life, I've seen the municipal courts really work with people who struggle to pay just in general fines and costs, either through payment plans, through community service as opposed to fines, or sometimes ultimately waiving those fines. I do have Judge McCoy from the municipal court here to address any specific concerns, but I would urge the members of the committee to pass this through so that we are no longer running afoul of the orders of the Missouri Supreme Court. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I know Judge McCoy is as well.
All right. Before we take questions, did you want to have the judge speak more on the bill, or?
I think the bill's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
If there are questions that someone has of the judge regarding it, I know he's happy to answer them, but I think he would probably more or less reiterate what I just said.
All right. Thank you, Alderman. I will turn it over to the members for questions, starting with Alderman Oldenburg. No questions. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
I actually don't have any questions about the bill, as you spoke to how we've seen this, and hopefully we thought it might turn a different direction. But since Judge McCoy is here, I wanted to see if he could probably maybe give some clarity to our colleagues here that weren't around then, if I can ask them just a few questions.
Absolutely. Judge McCoy?
Do we have to swear him in? Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm just trying to exercise all my chairman powers while I got it.
How often do you get to swear in?
I know, right? Judge, will you raise your right hand? Do you do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you so much, Judge. And if you could speak in the mic.
Both, Mr. Chairman. And
If you
members
could-
of the
if you could
committee.
speak into the mic.
There we go. All right. So actually, the operation of the board, just briefly, is that this surcharge will apply only to cases that are initiated in the new Show Me Courts case management system, or those cases in which we convert to that system or dispose of that system. So it's not going to be every case initially that it'll be charged, only be charged in those cases that are opened or dispositioned in Show Me Courts. And so there'll be a transitional period of time where we're going to be disposing of cases in our old case management system where this isn't going to be charged. And you'll see those qualifications in the bill, as well as the qualification that this fee will not be charged if the court in a particular case decides to waive the costs in any particular case.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that sometimes, a lot of times with these surcharges, there's just a whole line of unintended consequences that come along with it. And I thank you. I think it's notable that we should mention the efforts that you all have been going through since like 2019 to try to take this in a different, knowing that we had some things that were already in place. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to those briefly. And then again, just remind us that we don't, I know we don't have a lot of discretion, but we want to make sure that people know our passion and our heart for making sure that we are doing our best to carry out not just things like this, but anything that comes to our constituency being justice involved.
So would you like me, were you asking me to explain some of the background?
Just some of the work that you all did. I know we started in 2019, but I want people to know that we didn't just now say, okay, to Brett's point, that we don't have a lot of say in this, but there was some efforts, some concerted efforts around this, and I think that the public should know about them.
There has been considerable effort. To emphasize, we are subject as a division of the circuit court to the supervision of the circuit court in procedural matters, as well as the presiding judge of the circuit. And so the Supreme Court has adopted a rule that says that you will use the state case management operating system, which is Show Me Courts, and no other for municipal case management purposes once it becomes available. They've been trying to make it available for some length of time. Beginning in 2019, we began a process of dialogue with the Office of State Court Administrator, who's responsible for carrying this out, where we have tried to understand their system. We have tried to make suggestions, what's called change requests, that have to go through an elaborate governance system within OSCA to make their program better, especially to deal with the fact that both we in Kansas City are substantially higher volume courts than any of the other courts in the state. Our court's bigger than some of the circuits that are in the state. And so we need efficiencies, less keystrokes, less mouse clicks than other places do in order to manage our caseload with the number of people we have and do it efficiently. So that back and forth has been occurring since 2019 when we first started this process. Some things they have improved, some tasks they have turned back to us, but we think that we have gotten their program to where it is better for the state, better for us. Are there some things that we would like to have fixed better? Sure there are, but we're reaching the point where we're coming down to the end of that negotiation and an enforced implementation of a go-live date.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you so much for all of your work here, not just in this, but all that you do for us.
I feel the need to defend our court because in defending our court, I'm trying to defend our city.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Heading down the line, Alderwoman Keys, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judge, for being here today. We certainly would not want to run afoul of the courts, but thank you for being here. I do not have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Alderwoman Velasquez?
Thank you also for being here, Judge. I have a question that's not necessarily related to the bill, but just for my information. How do we know just the average surcharge fee that, a defendant, if somebody goes to court, what that is?
In our court or in other courts?
Well, in our court. And if you have, just for I'm just for
Well,
context.
right
Mark.
now, on a traffic case in our court, when court costs are imposed, it's $57. On a non-traffic case, it's $55. There are cases that we routinely waive costs on Metrolink fare tickets. With the court cost included, they'd be up to $80.50. So we waive the fee, the charges on that, so it's $25 flat fine. We often do that on expired plates, an inspection certificate. If a person has a very large number of tickets, sometimes to make the total that they end up with more achievable and not to set them up for failure, we'll waive court costs in some of those cases. We can assign people who are unable to pay to do community service in lieu of hours. We have pay plans. We can reduce the amount of pay plan from our normal $50 a month. We take account of medical circumstances. Our Supreme Court requires us, whenever somebody says they are unable to pay, even if we give them time, to make inquiry into their financial circumstances to determine their ability to pay and what alternatives there are for them to discharge their legal financial obligation to the city.
Great, thank you. I have no further questions.
I guess that leaves me. No questions. I do want to say to my colleague, Clark Hubbard, I really appreciate you bringing the judge up to really elaborate more on something that's been in the works that you and other members have been working on. And I know you're really big, since these meetings are public, to make sure that the public also understands some of the work that undergoes. So really appreciate that clarity on this legislation. And Judge, you know, I admire you for a long time. I appreciate the work that you do and many others do. And thank you for your service.
All right, thank you. Thank you, members of the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
With that, Alderman, Chairman, you may close out.
Sure. Thank you, Vice Chair. You know, I think, as I stated earlier, I don't believe that we have a lot of discretion here. I realize the frustration of an additional charge here, but I want to lay out, both for members of the committee and members of the general public, this is not something that the city of St. Louis said, we'd like to charge people $7 more. This is something that we need to do because the Supreme Court has told us that we need to do it. And if we don't do it, then Judge McCoy and his colleagues risk sanction from that Supreme Court. And he doesn't have the power to change this himself, or else I'm sure it would have been done quite some time ago. So in a unusual turn of circumstances, the courts are coming to the legislative body and asking the legislative body for help. And I think that it's incumbent on us to help our courts when they need help. You know, they're one of the pillars of our society, of any society, really. And with that, I'll ask for this committee's favorable consideration.
Seeing no more questions, I would like to make a motion that we vote out Board Bill 56 with a do pass recommendation. Do I have a motion for that?
So move.
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. We have 6 aye votes.
With 6 aye votes, you sustain the motion for a do pass recommendation.
Thank you all. And thank you, Judge, for your expertise on that. And I'm hoping that we can get this thing through the full board in the coming weeks and get your courts in compliance with the Supreme Court directives before the summer's over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If you know, I'll go anywhere in place to answer any questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
With that, we will dispense of line item 4 and move to line item 6. We'll dispense with 5, move to 6, Prop S funds. So there's a bit of a discussion that needs to take place on the committee here, because if we want an outside entity to advise us on the various Prop S applications, we're going to need to put an RFP out before we break down for summer in order to maintain the timeline that we need to for these funds. So this is really just an open-ended question that anyone can jump in on. I want to avoid putting out an RFP and paying city funds to a third party to come in and kind of grade these applicants if members of this committee are going to disregard those findings. So I think it's prudent to discuss whether we want to grade these ourselves or whether it makes more sense to have a third party come in and grade the applications and go through it. Personally, I believe that having a third party do it perceptually, it makes it so that no one's pet project is going to get funded if we have applications that are graded by a third party and then we allocate the funds that way. What I'd like to avoid here, as we've seen sometimes with these funds in the past, the decisions are made historically in closed rooms where the public doesn't have a lot of input on it. And so I'd like to have people groups who want the funding to come and discuss that and to apply, and to hear from various groups that have gotten the funding in the past, the ups and downs of the program itself, and then to rely on that third party to ultimately help us make those decisions. And I think we'll be able to make better informed decisions having a third party, an uninterested third party, grade the applications. And with that, I'll open it up to anyone who wants to chime in.
I agree. And I do feel and see, having seen it done both ways, think that the third party, having a third party involved will definitely make the process not only go smoother, but in some ways, since I, again, have seen it both ways, fairer and equitable, have a more equitable transfer of those funds to the groups. I love the idea of bringing the groups in. You know how I am about that. So I don't know if the process, I know, again, seeing it done different ways, I know sometimes the groups that came in were groups that had already been vetted, I think, that year by United Way when they came in, and I know that we were on Zoom a couple of times, but having them speak publicly and speak to their wins and their measurable outcomes in the program that they're doing in the communities, I think is important. And then having that third party, again, vet it and bring it back to us, I think will be a good way and a better way for us to move forward with that process now, since we've seen, again, some of the shortfalls in the old ways.
I have a clarification question. When you say us, you're referring to the Public Safety Committee would grade and choose?
Historically, that's how it has
Choose.
worked.
Maybe there haven't been grades necessarily, but
If
choose.
a subcommittee of the
Subcommittee
Yeah.
is done.
Public Safety Committee.
But, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with the Alderman from the 10th that I think the third party brings a level of objectivity. This committee can still make any decision it wants, but having that information on someone who was a third-party reviewer, qualifying and rating the most worthy of projects and organizations is nothing but helpful in my mind.
I also agree. I would just have one question, sort of caveat with the RFP, if there's a way, because I think in one of our previous committee meetings, we discussed that there hasn't been any metrics for like long-term success or like outcomes? Is that something that we can, you know, I want to just say, I mean, I think that some metrics are good. I also realize that with like outcomes like this, I mean, if you're trying to prevent something, you know, it's hard to measure things because you don't want them to happen. But I also feel like that if, with this investment with the city, that we should be thinking of that, or if there's some kind of piece that we can do with this third party, or when that would be appropriate to put something measurable in place.
Absolutely. And I've been talking to Mr. Pickney about that, and I think that most people agree that we would like to see more metrics on this. One of the issues has been some of the entities that benefit the most from this don't have the time, money, and energy to keep a whole lot of statistics. And then on the, as you noted, it's very hard to account for something that didn't happen. Like to say, oh, a violent act did not happen because, you know,
Because we did this.
because we did X, Y, or Z. So the metrics are also just tricky to come by. That's not to say that there are not models for it, but I think that we all know that there are various studies out there that oftentimes violence is secular in communities. And it seems that with the additional ARPA funds that we have this cycle in particular, that there is some interest in placing these funds, these Prop S funds, particularly towards violence prevention in youth and involving, you know, the rehabilitation of people who have been victims of violence, exposed to violence, to try and break some of those cycles in our community. And so I do think that the metrics are important, and that's part of why I want to have some of the past recipients come in and discuss this with us, because the way that it's sometimes worked historically, we hand out the money, but we're not necessarily taking into account the application when we're allocating the dollar amount. So first, if you needed $90,000 to run your program and we give you $15,000, it may not be of any use to you. You may not be able to get the thing done. On the flip side, if you're a larger program and we give you $15,000, you may not need that at all. And so trying to balance the two to ensure that we're getting this money to the groups who need it, but also giving the amounts that they need and doing it at the timing that they need. One of the things that we're looking at is changing the timing of this to coincide with the fiscal year, which is going to help in terms of just the grants that they rely on to make sure that this money makes sense for the programming that they're trying to do.
So is there a way that we can, I mean, I think that that's great, and I don't want to, you know, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of handing it off to a third party. I'm just wondering, as we're trying to think about it from our end and structuring it in a way that makes sense for these organizations, is that something that if we, you know, hire a third party to write this RFP, that there can be some kind of evaluation that we can include in saying, okay, you're going to create this RFP, but also that, can you give us some recommendations of how to structure this work and maybe how to even balance out that we want to give small nonprofits that may not have big funds and may not have the staff to do the evaluation, that we're kind of balancing that, because some of those programs might be more effective in the way that, as you know, we've noted that we can't see, but are still effective. But can they help do that?
I believe that what we're trying to do is have the organizations agree to maintaining a data set, basically, but that wouldn't be looking backwards, that would be looking forwards. And so moving forward, so in the years to come when we're divvying out this money, we'll be able to look at actual data on it and see the total number of people who are actually helped by these programs, the utilization of them, like I said before, whether the funding made sense. And the goal of this is to not to permanently prop up any organization. This is a piece of the funding for various entities, and we've seen some organizations that rely almost entirely on these funds, and that's really not what they were intended for. This is supposed to be a part of your funding, not all of it, because like any grant program, the funds can go away. And so we want to make sure that we're propping up newer entities and then entities that are on their way to becoming self-sustaining, to ensure that as we move forward, we have more and more community groups that are helping with this violence prevention.
Thank you.
Sure. So it sounds to me like there's a real desire here to have that third party assess the applications and give us recommendations. Does anyone not want a third party? Is anyone uninterested in hearing from a third party to assess it, or thinks it's a waste of money, anything like that? It is uninterested, thinks that we alone should be making these decisions?
I think that it is important that we have a third party. You know, naturally, nobody wants to pay the money, but how else are you going to get it? So it is, and I think it's a crucial part that that third party plays in the transparency of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here, and vetting the agencies that would take part in this program. So I don't see how you really can get around not having a third party.
That's my exact feel on it. And did you have something to add?
Echo, I think what everyone said. I think third party is important. Also want to echo it'd be good to be able to hear from the organizations. But who would pay for this?
Are you saying the Prop S funds in general?
Or the third party?
So since it's under the discussions that I've had, it seems to be kind of a de minimis cost. So we're able to use these funds to administer these funds, basically. And so it's not like it's going to be a huge expense. And I think it probably behooves us to do that, A, so that there's not the perception that we're handpicking winners and losers, and B, we're all busy folks who may not be experts in which community groups are doing the best work out there. So to have someone neutral who can really dig in and address some of the concerns, I think makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like there's no opposition to that. So with that, I would make a motion that that I will move forward in requesting third-party assistance on Prop S funds as we move forward.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanier. Alderman Aldred.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanier, we have 6 aye votes.
All right, and we do have an item number 2 to committee discussions that was a late arrival, so it's not on our agendas, but Reverend Darrell Gray, after last week's committee hearing regarding the Detention Oversight Board, wanted to add to the conversation, and as this is, as we expressed, an ongoing conversation, I think it's appropriate that we continue to take testimony on it. We will be inviting more members forward, but At this point, I'd like to hear from the Reverend and what he has to say on the matter. And Reverend Gray, could I swear you in real quick?
Sure you can.
All right. Reverend, do you swear or affirm that everything you're going to tell us today is the truth to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. Thank you. Please proceed.
My name is Reverend Darrell Gray. I am a city resident. I come here, I'm the pastor of the Greater Fairfax Missionary Baptist Church. I currently serve as the vice chair for the Detention Facility Oversight Board. Formerly, I served as the chair for the Corrections Task Force that was created by our former mayor, Lyda Cruson. And so I come here in that capacity. I want to say to the board as the committee, as I'm listening, thank you. I'm encouraged by the conversation and the words and the action that you've taken, transparency and accountability. Another set of eyes is not bad, particularly when you're allocating city money, and especially for crime prevention. I'm not going to be before you long. I was going to, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me on very short notice to be here with you this afternoon. I was going to wait, Mr. Chair, to give my insight and input as it relates to the Detention Facilities Oversight Board and what has been taking place. But yesterday, I had an opportunity to see some things that disturbed me very much. I'll try to go into as much detail as I can.
Please do.
Without giving thought to any legal ramifications that it may have on me. I was invited as a member of the Detention Facility Oversight Board to meet with city employees who have access to the Criminal Justice Center. I was shown a video by staff that was taken yesterday of detainees in a holding cell. Several detainees, I counted at least 11 in one holding cell, and was informed that these are male, that these detainees, many of them have been in that holding cell in excess of 4 to 5 days, in a holding cell, sleeping on the floor. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to see the size of the holding cells, but those holding cells primarily accommodate maybe 4 people on a short-term basis. These people were housed on a long-term basis, and I had an opportunity to view that through a video that was taken by employees who have access to the center. Needless to say, I was extremely alarmed, not just as the vice chair of the Oversight Committee, not just as the former chair of the Corrections Task Force, because we've gone through this. The task force had 86 recommendations as a result of 4 riots that someone could have been killed. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but we had 4 riots in that jail cell, and one of the reasons was overcrowdedness. People being forced to be stacked on top of each other. It is, for lack of a better word, inhumane. And I'm sure that it is a violation of every policy that has anything to do with detaining people within our criminal justice system, and specifically in a short-term detention facility. And so to view that, I couldn't wait. I couldn't unsee what I saw yesterday. That was one thing. The other thing that came to my attention is a detainee who was supposed to be segregated, not allowed certain items, for example, utensils for meals. This is someone who has been declared to be a suicide risk should be detained separately and was detained with someone who is not a suicide risk. And so when we talk about meal utensils, for example, if you're on suicide watch, you cannot get meal utensils. But the person in the cell with the person on suicide watch is able to have it. I was also informed that there are still doors that have not been repaired. Once again, this is something that we talked about years ago when we talked to the task force. That was one of the reasons that the task force was created, for security reasons, because detainees were able to get out. We still have some of these doors. We still have detainees who are still in cells where these doors are not fixed. And so I come before the Public Safety Committee because the Oversight Board has been restricted from doing its job. We can't do our job. You've heard testimony. You've heard from the former commissioner, Matt Brummer, former FBI agent, who came before this committee and said that the Oversight Board is being obstructed by the Commissioner of Corrections and the city attorney. I'm here to say that all of that is correct, but what I saw yesterday involves an immediate response. What I saw yesterday is, Mr. Chair, is not an allegation. It is not suspicion. It is not something that is unfounded. It is something that I've seen with my own eyes and information that has come directly from officers in that building. Our Oversight Board has the authority to subpoena, but we can't. We can only bring in our own legal support if we go by way of the city attorney, who we have been at odds with. It is a mess, for lack of a better word. It is ineffective. It is inefficient. It basically doesn't exist. The Oversight Board doesn't exist except for meeting and conversation only. We have not been able to have access to the facility. And what bothers me, Mr. Chair, is that even this committee was invited to visit the facility without orientation, without training, without all of the things that we've been required to have as an Oversight Board. You've been invited without that. Without needing any of that, you've been invited. But we have been constructed based upon an ordinance that has come from the Public Safety Committee to the board and has been approved. But we can't get in. And then finally, the other thing that concerned me, information that I received yesterday from city staff, is that there were 2 police officers assigned to the CJC to do investigations. They had no training from the Commissioner of Corrections. The staff all had investigative backgrounds and were extensively trained. They were placed there to do investigations of staff committing crimes and when staff were hurt by detainees. Those officers are no longer in that building. There is a police officer over prisoner processing, 2 police officers over prisoner processing on the first floor. The only way that I was able to see the video that I saw was because this particular employee had on a body camera, but we don't know how many of the correctional officers are using body cameras and if they're on. There's so much we don't know about what is happening in this building. The problem is, to date, there's 639 detainees over there. And those numbers are going to grow. With what we've been able to determine with the new circuit attorney, who has brought on additional prosecutors, who have brought on federal prosecutors to help, with the fact that the Circuit Attorney's Office is no longer issuing subpoenas but warrants, those numbers are going to grow. And so if those numbers grow, and yesterday we see 11, 12 detainees in one cell for days at a time, Mr. Chair, what is going to happen tomorrow or next week as the Circuit Attorney begins to work through his process, his workload? The task force was created so that we don't have the riots that we had a couple of years ago, so that we don't have detainees hurting each other or detainees hurting staff or staff hurting detainees, so that we can make sure that we have conditions that are humane, where people's constitutional rights are not violated. And so if the Oversight Committee cannot do its job, then we have to appeal to the entity that created the Oversight Committee, which is you. This entity, the Public Safety Committee, the ordinance was discussed and approved and voted out of this committee, went to the floor, and it was approved. And so we have to come to the Board of Alder People. We have to come to this committee because, Mr. Chair, we have nowhere else to go, and we fear for the worst. And so now that you've been told that it is not speculation, that it is not innuendo, then it's on record. What I saw, I'm putting on record. I cannot unsee. And the fact that I saw it yesterday, I am obligated, morally and otherwise, to bring it to your attention. And so we're hoping that this committee will see fit to authorize a subcommittee that may be responsible for doing an independent review or investigation immediately, in light of the fact that we can't do anything, that this committee will assist in facilitating the Oversight Board to have independent legal counsel. And we have, Mr. Chair, spoken to Alderman Aldridge, who has indicated his support, and Alderwoman Hubbard, who's been supportive of the Oversight Board from day one. And finally, to review the ordinance that created this Oversight Board, because there are restrictions in that does not allow us to be effective, to operate. And there are, I believe, and members of our Oversight Committee believe, that if we review that ordinance, there are some things that are restrictive that could be removed that still safeguards the integrity of the city, legal responsibilities within the city, but also allows us to do our jobs. And those are the things that we're asking. We want to do this work. We're concerned about the health, the safety, and the welfare of not just detainees, but staff and administration as well. And if we can't do it, somebody has to. And so I will close with that, and I'll entertain any easy questions, and Alderwoman Keys can entertain any hard questions.
I appreciate you coming here today, Reverend. I know it's not always easy to come forward, and I appreciate that you saw something that you felt morally compelled to come to discuss with us. I will ask, do you have a copy of the video that you're discussing, or did you just see it?
I saw it. It was a staff person. It was shown to me by a staff person. As I said, legally, I'm not sure where that goes from here.
Sure.
If the Oversight Board was able to do its job, we would subpoena that information. I haven't asked the staff person if they're willing to give it the video willingly. I do know, obviously I know who the person is. There were other people that witnessed it as well. So legally, I don't know how that operates. If this committee made it so that I would have to divulge the name of the staff and/or that information, then that's what I would have to do. That's why I'm saying, Chairperson, this is real, and it has legal ramifications.
Absolutely.
So I'm bound by whatever the law says I have to do. I'll obviously conform to whatever the law says I have to do. But the video does exist.
Sure, no, and I don't want you to think
I hope
that
I didn't, and I'm trying to answer you very directly.
Absolutely.
Without getting myself in any legal trouble because I haven't talked to a lawyer.
Well, and, you know, really all I was getting at was not whether the video exists. I'll certainly
I'm sure it can be made
take
available
you at your
to
word on that.
It can be made available to you, sir. If you make the request, it can and will be made available to this committee.
Because, yeah, I think, and I think it would be useful as we move forward in our discussions here to have all of the evidence kind of on the table that people are discussing. I think there's a overwhelming desire from virtually everyone that I've spoken to have good oversight of our detention facilities. We need to make sure that people are being treated in a constitutional and humane manner. We often discuss here that many of the people in our facilities have not been convicted of any crime. These are innocent men and women until such time that they may not be, but I think it's not lost on the members of this committee that, you know, anyone can get arrested and then you have your day in court, but that can take quite some time, and that there should be a basic minimum standard for the way that you're treated in the meantime, should the judge see fit to keep you confined during that period. I want to thank you. I don't have any questions at this point for you. That was the only one that I had, but I'll certainly open it up if any of the committee members have any questions for you. I'll just go down the list here. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No direct questions of you, Reverend, but maybe just a statement, Chairman. I think this is the work of this committee. Here we have a vice chairman of an oversight committee that effectively is unable to do oversight. And I think the creation, the intention of our direction for that committee to exist is to make sure that we are not having situations that were just described to us. So I think it is the work of this committee, and whether or not we create a subcommittee to further evaluate, give more teeth to the ordinance that created the oversight committee around this particular set of facts, or, you know, to ensure it never happens, this kind of behavior does not happen. So I stand ready to work with you and how we can figure that out.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alderman.
You bet. Thank you.
Alderman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Reverend Gray, for always standing in the gap and being a voice for so many vulnerable and voiceless here in our community on so many different levels, on so many different spaces. Everybody knows the passion and the intended efforts that I display and show and act on when it comes to civilian oversight on every level. And I know that, you know, we know this fight goes on. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We hear that all the time, and things like this actually help in the process because we see where there's holes, where there's gaps, and where there's things we can make changes. But being able to not be operative at all. It just really breaks my heart knowing what we went through to get this in place, knowing the meetings we sat through when we vetted you all, and being there when you all were sworn in. And again, so you know where I am with this, and being continuing to be an advocate in whatever position and role I can play into it. And the questions I have from your report, and that you might not be able to answer them now, but since we are all on public record, would be what happened to those 2 officers? Or is there intent for them to be replaced? Or did they move in a different direction? Is there somebody else in that space? The 2 officers that you mentioned that are no longer
They have not
there.
been replaced.
Okay. And the things about the body cameras, that was a big fight in the community. So knowing whether those are operable or not, working if people are using them, what's the protocol on if they're not using them, how that comes into play. That's big for me, making sure that's fully utilized, because again, those were cries out of efforts that came worldwide about the use of body cameras. The independent subcommittee, so were you speaking of a subcommittee from this?
Yes.
From the Public Safety Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we would have to talk about what that would look like, or if we would be able to move that forward. And the only other thing I'll mention is that, right now while I'm thinking about it, is that our former colleagues, Alderwoman Murphy and Alderwoman Howard, their legislation passed was a city whistleblower law. So for the person that you're speaking about, because I can only imagine how they feeling like they can't cry out to anybody else, and so they reached out to you, and then it still is like it has to end there, and it doesn't. And I just want them to know about the ordinance. So I looked up the ordinance number. It's 70847. They can research that and see where that might put them in a position and empower them as a city employee. Again, it's called the City Whistleblower Law. It went into law in 2018. But I just want to make sure that, I cried, I told you all, not cried, but cried out to you all on that meeting and told y'all to please don't give up, because I can only imagine how you feel being so frustrated and feel like nobody's listening. But I can tell you that I feel like we're listening, and we're going to do whatever we can, again, with the efforts we all passed this legislation, and we want to see it work the best way, best practices on behalf of our constituents here and our citizens here in the city of St. Louis. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. And just, Alderwoman, to that point, Mr. Chair, to the Alderwoman, President Green's office, through her chief of staff, also reached out to us and indicated that President Green is also, her office is looking at this legislation too, and they see some things that could be amended. So just to let you know that there is some interest from the President's office as well.
I think there's fairly widespread interest in this. It was a hard-fought battle the first time around, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard was really leading the charge there. I was happy to fall in behind her and not be the one out in the front of that. But I think that it was hard enough fought to get it there, and I want to make sure that everything that we fought for is being utilized. With that, Alderwoman Keys, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of points that I wanted to go over. So is it the legislation that prevents you from doing the work, or is it individuals who are binding your hands from being able to
It's
do
an
the work?
excellent question. I think it's both. I think it's the interpretation of the legislation on one point, where the city attorney interprets the legislation. I mean, for us as an oversight committee, our legal representation is the city attorney. But the city attorney is also the legal representation for the Commission of Corrections. And so when you have the oversight board who has an issue with the Commission of Corrections, then obviously there's a conflict of interest. And so where we disagree with the city attorney's interpretation of the ordinance, there's nowhere for us to go. And then when we get something stamped confidential, lawyer-client confidentiality, then that again ties our hands, because then we can't even discuss it. And so without our own independent counsel, when we disagree with the city attorney. That's been a problem. From a personnel point of view, we firmly believe that it is the Commissioner of Corrections who will not provide information, will not provide information as it is requested, will not provide accessibility, not just to us, Alderwoman, but also the staff. It's not just the oversight board of volunteers. There's paid staff who have been hired because of their expertise to investigate, who are also not able to have access to excessive use of force reports, any, complaints. And so it's like everything is at a standstill. We're paying staff who are not able to do what they're being paid to do. And so it's both, which is extremely unfortunate. And we're not naive, Alderwoman. We understand that there are lawsuits. I mean, 6 people died last year. So we're not naive. We understand that there are legal ramifications and that there are those who don't want oversight and don't want us to go in asking questions because what we find out may exacerbate a legal situation. It is all of that. And so, as I said, we're not naive, but this committee and the board charged us with a responsibility. And we can't do it. And so if the city attorney is concerned about legal challenges, and you have an oversight committee that may exacerbate a pending legal case, then who's going to get restricted? Who's going to get left out? This is some common sense stuff, but it's extremely political, and we get the politics, but we weren't created to be political, and we're not. And so I hope that my long answer answered your
Thank you.
my long answer helped your short question.
So the other, you mentioned that, this board apparently has been able to go over and, I guess tour. I sat on 2 grand juries over the past 20-plus years, and I can tell you with absolutely no training, not only did we go to the workhouse, the city jail, and Potosi Prison, no training.
That's right.
But here you are, the oversight board, and you cannot. So that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm sorry that they told you to bake bread, but they gave you no flour. And so it makes it really difficult to produce bread.
Yes. Thank you, Alderwoman.
And Alderwoman Velasquez.
I just want to say to my fellow Alder, Clark Hubbard, thank you for all your work in bringing this all your work on this previously. I also stand ready to work with you if you're leading the charge, whoever is leading the charge. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this and the continuing commitment to hear this. Thank you, Reverend Gray, for following your sense of moral urgency and bringing it to our attention. I have a question and just sort of a statement, but you mentioned before when they did I guess when the committee did the audit, that you had 86 recommendations.
Yes.
Just roughly, how many of those 86 recommendations, since you outlined them, have?
Excellent question, Alderwoman. The one that we know for sure, one of the recommendations was to create the oversight board. So that happened. We've asked the Commissioner for Corrections to give us some indication on how many of those 86 recommendations have been facilitated, completed. We have not got a direct answer from her. The indirect answer that we received from the Commissioner was, well, out of the 86, some are in this department, some are in that department, some are in that, and we get that. But as the Commissioner responsible for following through with the 86, even if it means assigning it, then we haven't received that information, not in whole. And so I wish I could stand here and tell you with any certainty, Alderwoman, how many of the 86, with the exception of the one, and that's the creation of the Oversight Board.
And a follow-up question to that, if you were to prioritize those 86, I'm sure they're all important, but what are the ones you mentioned? Overcrowding sounded like it was one. What are the most critical?
The locks. The locks continue to be, I mean, that's a safety issue for everyone involved. You still have doors that can be jimmied by the inmates that exist right now. There's a lot of doors that have been fixed, but we don't know how many. We don't know what floor they've been fixed, but we do know I do know from the conversation with staff yesterday that there are still doors, and the staff showed me how those doors can be jimmied. I don't know if you know it or not, but there was an escape attempt a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if that information has come to this committee, but this is information that I obtained yesterday. So the Oversight Committee was definitely the priority. The locks were second to that. Health concerns was another. We weren't sure that inmates were receiving the medication that they needed to have. We weren't sure that mental health needs were being met. All of these, so health concerns. We could not get an accurate record of how the medical unit was responding to medical concerns. And so obviously that bothered us. The segregation of detainees based upon those who have been accused of violent crimes versus those who've been accused of nonviolent crimes. Younger detainees versus more seasoned detainees. Those with obvious mental health issues, and what type of treatment have these detainees been receiving. We couldn't see a record of that. Obviously the food was a problem. The food in any detention center, jail, prison, whatever, is always going to be a problem. So that was the least of the concern, except that we wanted to make sure that people were receiving something that was quote unquote within the standards of the criminal justice policy, standard operational procedure. So we needed to check that. We were concerned with use of force, and that we were not able to ascertain resolution to complaints as related to correctional officers against detainees allegation, or detainees against correctional officer allegation. So we weren't able to get any of that. Those were the things that came out of the 86 recommendations. And one that and I took a lot of heat as a member of the progressive community. I said that building, for the number of detainees that we had, that building wasn't suited. It's a box. It's a box. They have nowhere to go. And when you have detainees that have been there, as I think the chairman said, not just days, Mr. Chair, but weeks, months, and years. The thing that I cried yesterday, because as I watched these detainees in this holding cell, it was like we were treating them as caged animals. And if we treat people long enough like caged animals, what do you think they're going to become? And so when I saw these men, and that was part of it also, we were concerned, but our concern was that people weren't going through the process quick enough for the numbers to decrease. And so so that was the other issue. What's the logger jam? Is it through the circuit attorney's office? Is it through the circuit court? Is it bond issues? And so that was another issue that was part of our recommendations, working with the circuit attorney, with the courts, to see how we can move people quicker through the process. And so our audit, our assessment covered a broad range of concerns. And we did have a former warden who was a consultant, our staff support. who walked us through the entire process and walked us through every phase of it. And so those were some of the bigger issues. I mean, COVID was an issue then too. So, you know, the COVID protocol was important. Visitation, you know, people, detainees were not able to get proper visitation, tablets weren't working. So the communication between detainees and family members, detainees and lawyers, that became an issue too. So all of that erupted. It was the perfect storm that when you have all of these things combined, then it exploded 4 times. 4 times. The reality that we see, Alderwoman, is that the same things that we talked about then, we believe currently exist, but there are things that we cannot substantiate because we can't get in there to be able to give oversight, guidance, advice, recommendations. So I'm sorry again.
No, thank you for your testimony. And I just want to say, again, I'm ready to work with this committee, but I also think it's important to say that everything that I've seen and I've read, that in order to deal with the big issues that this committee is trying to face with violence in the city and public safety, that it is critical that having functioning, transparent civilian oversight boards are part of that mix. So thank you again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to Vice Chair Aldridge. Do you have any questions for the Reverend?
No questions. Comments in the same vein of sentiments of the members of my committee. First, Reverend Gray, a.k.a. Pops, appreciate you being here. I also want to, since we're on the record, really thank our chairman, Mr. Narayan. He has taken this situation seriously. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend the Detention Facility Oversight Committee, and was just flabbergasted again by the lack of transparency that you guys have not been able to receive with a task that I think everybody on this committee has taken serious, especially at the leadership of Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who passed the Civilian Oversight Bill to make sure there is that oversight. And yesterday, just with going on record, I want to also go on record now, Mr. Brumman, who resigned, came in front of the Budget Committee within the weeks that his budget was up. And probably a week later, he ended up resigning, and it became public. As soon as that happened, with all of us just coming in, was not aware of that. As soon as that situation happened and it made news media and whatnot, I know Chairman took that resignation very seriously, as I'm sure him and myself was also reached out by members of the Detention Facility Oversight saying, hey, there's an issue going on that really raised the issue to the level of where we as a committee wanted to address it. So I really do thank you and other members that were whistleblowers after the resignation of Mr. Brumman, because it is not easy to, go out on public and say, there's an issue going on. There's been an issue going on, and since this board has got elected in April, and took a little minute before we got committee chairs, and then took a little minute before we got a committee, but I do know that this committee is serious about addressing the lack of oversight that is going on. I haven't probably talked to one member that hasn't, and also stand ready at the helms of the chair to serve on the subcommittee, to do as ever necessary. I do think it is critically important that we look at ways that I think the legislation that Alderwoman Clark Hubbard passed was very strong, and very pivotal of getting everything going. And I think, with legislation, sometimes you see if things can be better, and I think we all stand ready to see what outside of that legislation, but just legislation in general, because maybe that is perfect, but we need to add some other stuff. I do want to go on record and also agree that I think it is unfortunate that the city councilor Sheena is holding up processes for you guys to be able to get stuff done. It is strange that, like you say, a city council would be representing you all and as well as representing the entity you're trying to get in, and everything's confidential. I know we've ran at that at the board where we can't even share legal opinions, which is just absolutely ludicrous, and would love to, work with you all to figure out how do we work on legislation to get you all legal counsel that is not represented by an entity that is also trying to block you all from getting in. So I know there's a lot of frustration, and I felt it on the call last night from members that are upset to feel like every time they go through one avenue, another door is closed, another avenue, another door is closed. Like Alderwoman Key said, it's crazy that all this continuous training is being told that you need to get in. Like I said, on the state rep level, it's state statute that we have the ability to go into any prison at any time, and I've never been trained to go into a prison until myself and Representative Collins just started showing up in prisons and seeing how a lot of these prisons we're not doing the right things, especially when you don't try to call them ahead of time to go into these places. So I've talked to the chairman. Like I said, I know he's taking this situation seriously. And as vice chair, look forward to working with him and the rest of the members of the committee to do what's necessary to make sure that transparency and accountability is happening, because it's wild that a year later y'all still can't get into a prison. I mean, not prison, a jail. And to me, that only reads that they're trying to hide something. And I'm not scared to say it and want to go on record and say that is a problem. And we stand ready to help in whatever way possible.
Thank you, Alderman. And for your information, we do have lawyers who have indicated that they're willing to work with the Oversight Board pro bono. And so we do have that resource available. We just haven't moved forward on that because we're unclear what we can and cannot do, but we do have that resource available.
Understood. And so, yeah, I want to thank you for coming today. I know in my own life, I've sometimes seen things where there's a moral compulsion to take it to someone who can help. If you are at wit's end, you have to appeal to someone who you believe may be able to move the situation forward. And I appreciate you for doing that today. I think we have an obligation to care for our most vulnerable wherever they are. And I think that I can't think of a more vulnerable position than having your freedom taken from you, and then to also not be dealt with in a humane, constitutional way. One of the things that we founded this country on was the basic minimum standards for treating human beings. It's taken us quite some time to live up to that American dream, but I think we have to continue to pursue a more perfect nation, and sometimes that starts right here in our jail. It certainly wouldn't be the first large social movement to start out of a jail. And so I'm committed to continuing this work. This will not be the end of the discussion. I feel fairly confident we're closer to the beginning than the end of this discussion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I want to say that I'm more confident today than I was yesterday. Being before this committee, knowing the people on this committee, my level of confidence has shot way up. And so thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening, and whatever we can do to assist, please let us know. And I'll follow up on the video if you get to that point where you require or request that, we can make sure that that's available.
Yeah, if you could get your hands on it just in an informal manner, that would be great. And you can forward it to me. A random person can forward it to me. I'm not, however we want to go about that. as Alderwoman Clark Hubbard pointed out, there are protections for city employees who feel like there may be some concern to their job or their well-being should they blow the whistle on illegal activities. So we certainly want to make sure that everyone who works through the city, regardless of what department you're in, if there are issues, you are allowed to come forward. There are protections for you.
That's important. I'll follow up on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee.
Absolutely. Thank
For your
you.
advocacy. Thank you.
All right. With that, Madam Clerk, is there any written testimony?
We have none.
All right. We'll dispense with line item 7. Move to announcements. Does anyone have any announcements?
We have none.
Hearing none. Move to line item 9, excused members. At this point, I would entertain a motion to excuse Alderwoman Saunier.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the Alderwoman Saunier will be excused. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The Public Safety Committee is now adjourned.